All right, well, I'm very excited for our next speaker. I was very excited when I heard that his company was sold to Salesforce for $700 million. I was very excited for him because it's usually there's like a sense of, as an entrepreneur, a little bit of envy. But in this case, literally I said, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. This next speaker spoke at a Signal Cincinnati that we did earlier in the year and really brought down the house. He told an extremely personal story that just had everyone on the edge of their seats. Probably the definition of a high-order bit Michael Lazerow developed. When I was with him backstage, I said, "Are you going to do the same one? Because it was so good." And he's like, "No, no, 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 I'm wrote an entirely new one." But I'm sure it's also going to be just as compelling. The founder and CEO of Buddy Media, Michael Lazerow. Join me in welcoming him.
Hello, everyone. Mike Lazerow, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. You have to look no further than my high school yearbook to see how the first 18 years of my life is really spent trying to avoid the idea that I'm going to become vulnerable. If you look closely at this page, you'll realize that I put my only 2 dates in high school on my yearbook page. Okay, who does that? And the highlight or the low light is the one picture I had with Donald Trump from some random bar mitzvah. I don't even know whose bar mitzvah it is. And I put a quote, which I like making deals, preferably big deals. That's how I get my kicks. If this wasn't a facade, I don't know what was. Now, all of this kind of quest for perfection led to an ulcer in high school, which looking back, I'm like, that was not a good thing. It wasn't until I got to college that I really embraced this idea of vulnerability. That's actually Seth Meyers from SNL, who I lived with for 4 years in the hat, not the Han Solo. This idea of the power of vulnerability, Professor Brown from the University of Houston really popularized this idea, if not kind of created the idea. And the idea was very simple and is very simple. I'd encourage you to read her TED Talk, which has now gotten over 5 million views, and said, you know, connection is why we're all here. It's why we're on the face of the earth. And if you don't connect, if you don't know how to love and be vulnerable and, you know, connect with people, you really, you know, give up on why we exist as human beings. So really powerful stuff. And she also, after talking to 1,000 people, thousands of people, realized that in general, the one thing that keeps people from being vulnerable is ourselves. So we keep ourselves back. We don't go out on that date. We don't put ourselves out there. And so we're our own worst enemy, as we are in many of the things we do. She then looked at who are the people who are most connected, who are content, who are able to, you know, really connect in an empathetic and fundamentally different way. And she realized that the people who accepted and embraced their vulnerability were able to do this. What made them vulnerable, okay, when they embraced that, that's what, you know, they thought made them beautiful, and they were able to connect in a way that the other people didn't. You know, why do we love this dog? You know, dressed awfully, you know, one of the most popular Disney characters. He's friends with Mickey and Donald Duck, the 2 coolest characters. Walt Disney actually didn't like this character, but we love him because he has embraced, assuming it's a he, which I think it is, his vulnerability. So if vulnerability, and I started thinking, is so important in humanity and who we are in people, why is it so difficult for us in business to become vulnerable? Every example that I looked at in terms of the use of vulnerability in the corporate world was negative. Okay, so the idea of being vulnerable as a business is always negative. It's a sign of weakness. It's a sign that we're not in charge or something is wrong. Okay, whereas, you know, I'm here to argue that it's actually a good thing. You know, honesty and transparency, which are required, you know, by consumers these days, you know, forces us to be vulnerable. Okay, if you're going to be honest, you're going to be transparent, by definition, you're going to be vulnerable. You're going to be kind of open to attacks if you look at the definition of vulnerability. So the dilemma that we're looking at is you need to connect with consumers in a whole new way. Okay, we know that. Okay, consumers demand transparency in the connections with you. Okay, so they demand that you're transparent. In order to truly connect, you need to be vulnerable. Okay, so in order to really connect, you need to be honest, transparent, which makes you vulnerable by definition. In order to be vulnerable, you need to be honest and transparent. Ultimately, that's what's so difficult for businesses. Okay, so the inability to kind of look past that fear of vulnerability is what prevents you from connecting, and it's just a nasty circle that you can't connect because you can't become honest and transparent. You can't become vulnerable. What's going to happen if we put ourselves out there? Okay, so companies strive for perfection in this world that embraces imperfection. Why do we love, Bill Clinton as a society? He's the most popular former president. Okay, he embraced that vulnerability. Okay, so how do we tap into the power of vulnerability? This is how headquarters used to be built for corporations. That is perfect. That is a sign of perfection, the GM head. And I like the Renaissance Center. It's a great building. This is the Facebook campus. It's open. It's vulnerable. I guarantee you it's a lot easier to sneak into Facebook's campus than GM's. GM's is like the Pentagon. So, TrendWatch basically came up with this idea of Flossom, which they looked at kind of brands that actually embracing their flaws. That was awesome. So human nature dictates that people have a hard time genuinely connecting with, being close to, or really trusting other humans who pretend to have no weaknesses, flaws, or mistakes. How many of us have perfect friends? Their kids are beautiful, they're beautiful, they talk about no problems in their marriage, their sex is better every night. None of us, because we hate those people if they exist, okay? We like people who are flawed, okay? And from a brand side, there are two traits that are really driving that. Human brands, all brands need to be human, and transparency triumph. Our life is better when everything around us, when everyone, all the brands are actually transparent and honest. And if you look at the research in terms of like ratings and reviews, it says this, 95% of the people don't trust ratings and reviews when they're all positive, okay? 68% trust reviews more when they see the bad reviews next to them. Okay, 67% of the people who seek out negative reviews, 67% of them actually spend a lot more with that site. So you look at companies who are doing this right and actually embracing vulnerability, and you're seeing them grow faster, innovate faster, and connect with consumers in a whole new way. Okay, so how do we get out of our own way and stop trying to be perfect and embrace our flaws? P&G talks about transparency, authenticity, honesty as core values of the company and why brands connect. So for the first time in 175 years, they did a P&G only Thank You Mom campaign. We all saw this on TV. Phenomenal campaign. They embrace the human suffering and condition of parenthood. I have 3 kids. It's tough. Very tough. And they use this as fodder for content, not only in the Olympics, but also the Special Olympics. They put their CMO, Mark, in the pictures. They jumped in and exposed their inner sides. And what did this lead to? If you look at the Ad Age story about this, they say $500 million in sales tied just to this campaign. I'm not here to say whether that's true or not, but I am here to say that directionally it's correct. Okay, and retailers that have activated that campaign in store have seen 5 to 20% sales lifts. Okay, so it's significant benefits from exposing the humanity and the personality and the character. Domino's, one of the best examples. Their pizza was awful. Okay, I live in New York, so I wouldn't necessarily go to Domino's anyway, but they embraced that. Their whole campaign was highlighting all these tweets that said, your pizza sucks, it's like cardboard. They basically redid the whole thing. They took their present, they got out there, they said, I know we made a mistake with our pizza. They then went and took the new pizza to the harshest critics of the pizza and captured them saying, this is delicious. Now, what does this mean? If you look at what they did, they were able to grow shareholder value, the stock price, by about 800% once they realized that they sucked, which should be the easiest thing you do as a company. And you look at how they've competed against their competition, and I don't think you can separate the fact that they were vulnerable from shareholder value growth. And so finally, just a personal story about embracing flaws for me. We decided to sell the business this summer. We actually didn't decide. Salesforce offered $800 million. So it made the decision really easy for us. And so I'd put together a video because I was in my office one Sunday, and it was just like this iPad video. Anyone have seen it in here? If not, it's at youtube.com/Michael Lazerow. And here was this social media guy. The video just takes off. So 250,000 views on Facebook and YouTube, and comments streaming in, and it's viewed in 180 countries: Madagascar, Yemen, and Somalia. The Survivor guy shares it on Facebook and tweets it. Mayor Bloomberg starts talking about it. Starts to trend with Buddy Media on Twitter. Media starts picking it up, Huffington Post and Mashable and all of these sites. And more importantly to me is our partners, our clients start tweeting it. Beverly Jackson, who's a wonderful person, runs all of the kind of marketing and social media at the Grammys. Scott Monty, who I took 2 years to try to get a meeting with, now I consider kind of a good friend of mine, but what does this mean for business? So clients and customers didn't remember this big price tag, which is a little uncomfortable. I'll deal with it, don't worry. But how do you personalize something that shouldn't be personalized? So they were inspired by the video, and now I think remember me and the company and are willing to buy from us because they know who we are as people. What's the ROI of that? Right? What's the ROI of putting yourself out there? And so the lessons, that I think you should take is embrace your flaws. You're not going to be able to hide them anymore. Demonstrate some empathy. Try to get out there and be kind of human. Be generous in all that you do. Be flexible and embrace that flexibility. Don't fear your sense of humor. And if you don't have one, take improv classes. Try to develop that sense of humor. And show some humanity in your customers, employees, and partners. I think we'll do the same. And above all else, be humble in victory, because tomorrow's a new day, and you probably will not win forever. So with that, I just wanted to reiterate, the goal, isn't to create these flaws, but embracing them is critical. This is one of 2 pictures from FDR, okay, who goes down as one of the greatest presidents. How much greater would he be if he showed everyone that he was in a wheelchair and people could relate? I think much greater. So all of these slides are at facebook.com/Lazerow. Thank you for the time.